As we move into the September of 2024, the race for the White House is heating up, and in this video, we'll be taking an in-depth look at Nate Silver's latest 2024 election forecast. For nearly a decade, Nate Silver led 538, one of the most well-known and respected election prediction platforms in the US. But now, with the new model and updated data, we'll see how his predictions play out for the race to 270 electoral votes between Donald Trump, the former president, and Kamala Harris. Also, it's important to take into account that Nate Silver and 538 have a very left leaning track record, and in 2020, they gave Trump a 10% chance of winning, but Trump obviously did way better than expected, and he almost won the election. I'll reiterate this point later on as well. We'll begin by filling in the solid states for both candidates. These are states where one candidate has a 99% chance or more of winning, making them essentially safe territory. The bar for solid states is set quite high in this model, so you'll notice fewer solid states than our previous videos. Let's start by breaking down what the solid states will look like for Kamala Harris. Starting off on the West Coast, Kamala Harris has California in her column. With 54 electoral votes, California is the crown jewel of Democratic victories and one of the most reliably blue states in the nation. Despite some dissatisfaction with local issues, including homelessness and the economy, Harris is still expected to easily win the state. And California's progressive strongholds such as Los Angeles, San Francisco, and the Silicon Valley keep it very safely in the Democratic column. Surprisingly, Hawaii doesn't fall into the solid category, in this forecast at least. Recent events, including the Biden administration's response to the Maui fires, have made the state slightly more competitive. Hawaii, traditionally very liberal, could shift closer to Trump than many would expect. Though Harris is still the favorite, it's a reminder that unexpected events can play significant roles in the election. And in the Northeast, New York remains solidly blue, which isn't surprising given the state's deep Democratic roots in urban areas like New York City. However, it's important to take note of the increasing dissatisfaction in the state due to Governor Kathy Hochul and lingering concerns after the resignation of Andrew Cuomo. Upstate New York, a more conservative region, could shift slightly towards Trump, but the margins in New York City should be more than enough to keep the state blue. Moving on, Illinois is another state for Harris. The Democratic stronghold of Chicago, with its large and diverse population, ensures that the state will stay blue. However, similar to New York, rural areas in Illinois are trending more conservative, and this is part of a larger trend that we see across the Midwest. The smaller northeastern states such as Vermont, Massachusetts, and Maryland are safely in Harris's column as well, as are the District of Columbia and the 1st District of Maine. These states are pillars for the Democratic support, driven by highly educated and affluent urban voters and progressive policies. Altogether, Harris begins with a solid foundation of 129 electoral votes. From these states. This is a strong start, but far from the 270 that she needs. Now, on to the Republican side, Donald Trump's base of support starts in the rural West and Midwest. Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, and both North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska except the 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, are solidly in Trump's columns. These states have voted Republican for decades, driven by conservative values on issues like gun rights, religious freedom, and smaller government. In the South, Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Tennessee are reliably red. Trump's appeal to Southern voters remains strong, particularly on issues like immigration, religious values, and deregulation. Kentucky and West Virginia also fall into this category, with their coal-based economies and resistance to progressive environmental policies. And in the Midwest, Indiana and Missouri are solid red. Both states have seen a growing shift towards Trump's brand of populism, with blue-collar voters increasingly aligning with the GOP. These states have become less competitive over time as their rural populations grow more conservative. With these states, Trump begins with 103 electoral votes, which is a strong base, but like Harris, he has a lot of work to do to reach 270. Next, we'll look at the likely states, those where either candidate has an 80 to 99% chance of winning. These states are more competitive than the solid states, but still clearly lean towards one candidate. Now let's go to the likely blue states for Harris. Oregon and Washington are Harris's first likely states. While these two states are generally Democratic strongholds, Oregon has become more competitive in recent years, particularly due to its urban and rural divide. The governor's race in 2022 highlighted this shift, with the Republicans making gains in rural areas. Despite this, Portland's progressive base keeps Oregon blue. Washington, home to Seattle's massive tech industry and a highly educated population, is another likely state for Harris. However, the margins in Washington could narrow as dissatisfaction with the state's handling of homelessness and public safety grows. Still, it remains safely in the Democratic column. Hawaii, while traditionally blue, is also considered a likely state due to dissatisfaction with Biden's handling of the Maui fires. This is a reminder that even in heavily Democratic states, events can shift the political landscape. Moving inland, Colorado and New Mexico are also likely blue. Colorado has become increasingly progressive, particularly in cities like Denver and Boulder. Though the state's libertarian streak in rural areas keeps it competitive, New Mexico, while blue, is showing signs of becoming more competitive as Hispanic voters, traditionally Democratic, begin to lean more Republican, especially in rural areas. And now in Minnesota, the home state of Harris's running mate, Tim Walz is another likely blue state. Trump came close to flipping it in 2016, but Walz's popularity as governor gives Harris a boost here. Minnesota has been trending slightly Republican in rural areas, but the Twin Cities and surrounding suburbs keep it in the Democratic camp for now. And in the Northeast, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, and most of Maine are likely blue. These states aren't as liberal as their neighbors like Massachusetts and Maryland, but they remain reliably Democratic. New Jersey, in particular, has faced scandals with Senator Bob Menendez, which could dampen Democratic enthusiasm. But Harris is still expected to win by a comfortable margin. Now we move on to Virginia, a state that has flipped to Biden in 2020, remains in the likely blue category. However, Republicans' gain in the state, particularly with the election of Glenn Youngkin as governor, showed that Virginia is becoming more competitive. Youngkin's win in 2021 was a wake-up call for Democrats, and Harris will need to focus on turnout in suburban areas to maintain the state's blue status. We also have the state of Maine, which I'll mark for now. On Trump's side, Montana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Alaska are likely red. These states have traditionally voted Republican but aren't quite solid due to slight demographic shifts. Montana, in particular, has seen some growth in its urban centers, which lean more progressive, but it's still firmly Republican. The key likely states for Trump are Iowa and Ohio. These states used to be battlegrounds, but have shifted sharply to the right in recent years. Trump won both by double digits in 2016 and 2020, and both states are re-elected Republican governors by large margins in 2022. Iowa, with its agriculture-based economy, and Ohio, a bellwether for much of the 20th century, have become strongholds for Trump's brand of populism and economic nationalism. Moving to the South, Florida and Texas are two of the most critical states for Trump. Florida, once the ultimate swing state, has shifted firmly into the Republican column in recent years. Trump won it by 3.4% in 2020, and Ron DeSantis' landslide re-election in 2022 by a 20-point margin solidified the GOP's control of the state. Florida's growing Hispanic population, particularly among Cuban and Venezuelan Americans, has also trended more conservative. Texas, with its 40 electoral votes, is another must-win for Trump. While the state has been trending leftward due to demographic changes in the cities like Austin, Houston, and Dallas, the shift has been slower than expected, and rural areas of Texas remain staunchly conservative. And Trump is expected to win state by a comfortable margin, though Democrats are making inroads in urban and suburban areas. With these likely states filled in, Trump and Harris still have a very tight race. So let's see what the lean states have to say about the rest of the election. Now let's look at those lean states whose margins are expected to be between 2 and 7 points. These are the battlegrounds, where both campaigns will be focusing their efforts in the final months of the election. Let's look at the lean blue states for Harris. The 2nd District of Nebraska is expected to lean towards Harris, as it did for Biden in 2020. And this district, which includes the Omaha metropolitan area, has become more competitive as its population grows and becomes more diverse. However, Trump won the district in 2016, so it's still up for grabs. In New Hampshire, Harris is still favored but faces a competitive race. New Hampshire is known for its independent-minded voters, and Trump came close to winning the state in 2016. Biden won it by 7 points in 2020, but the state's libertarian streak and growing frustration with national politics make it closer this time around. Don't think about counting Trump out, as if you look at the past election in 2016, Trump came within 0.037% of flipping the state but ultimately losing it. Maine's at-large vote is also expected to lean towards Harris, but the state's rural conservative northern areas could keep it competitive. Harris is likely to win Maine's 1st district comfortably, but the 2nd district is expected to go to Trump, making Maine one of the few states that splits its electoral votes. With these lean blue states filled in, let's move on to Trump's lean states as well. North Carolina is expected to lean Republican. I mean, this shouldn't be kind of obvious. Trump won the state both in 2016 and in 2020, and despite polling that showed that Biden would be ahead in 2020, Trump's rural base and strong support among white, working class voters carried the state. North Carolina's growing suburban areas make it more competitive. However, Harris is unlikely to replicate Obama's narrow 2008 victory here. So let's just mark that red. Georgia and Arizona, both which flipped to Biden in 2020, are key battlegrounds that Trump is favored to win back. And in Georgia, Biden won by just 0.024%, the closest margin of any state in 2020. That was definitely an anomaly, and the state's rapidly changing demographics, particularly in the growing influence of black voters in the Atlanta metro area, have made it more competitive. However, Trump's strong support in rural areas give him the edge. Arizona, with its 11 electoral votes, is another crucial state. Biden's narrow victory in 2020 was driven by strong turnout in the state's suburban areas, particularly in Maricopa County, but Trump's appeal among white, working class voters and a growing dissatisfaction with the Biden administration gives him the edge in 2024. Harris will need to focus on turning out the vote in Phoenix and Tucson to keep Arizona competitive. Also, the 2nd District of Maine will likely go for Trump as well, as there's no major cities nearby and more rural areas. With these lean states filled in, let's finally get to the tilt states. This is where the fun is. This is where either candidate has less than a 60% chance of winning. These are the true battlegrounds and where the election will be decided. If we go to Nevada, which has 6 electoral votes, it's expected to tilt towards Trump. The state has been trending Republican in recent years, particularly among Hispanic voters. Trump came close to winning Nevada in both 2016 and 2020, and this time he's favored to flip the state. Watch out for states with a high Latino population, as they are starting to drift away from the Democratic Party in recent years. And in the Rust Belt, we have Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. These 3 states decided the last election. Harris needs to win all 3 states to have a chance at victory, while Trump only needs to win one of them to secure the presidency. These 3 states decided the presidency, like I said, in 2016 and in the 2020 election. And these 3 states were a part of something called the Blue Wall, as they had not voted Republican until 2016, when Trump had flipped all 3 of these states. And in order for Kamala Harris to win the election, she will need to flip all 3 of these states, which is just highly unlikely to happen. Michigan is the most liberal of the 3, and Harris is a slight favorite here. The state's urban centers, particularly Detroit, give Democrats a strong base, but Trump's appeal among working class voters in rural areas could make it closer than expected. Wisconsin, with its 10 electoral votes, is another key battleground, which will be tilt blue state. Trump won the state in 2016 but narrowly lost it in 2020. Harris's running mate Tim Walz may help her in Wisconsin, but the state remains highly competitive. Finally, Pennsylvania, with its 19 electoral votes, is the biggest prize of the whole election, and I cannot emphasize this enough. Trump won Pennsylvania in 2016 but lost it narrowly in 2020. Without Biden on the ticket, Trump is favored to win Pennsylvania, and if he does, it will likely secure him as the next president. And in conclusion, with these final states filled in, Trump reaches 287 electoral votes, while Harris comes in at 251. And according to Nate Silver's latest forecast, Trump is a slight favorite to win the 2024 election. However, with 2 months left to go, anything can happen, and both campaigns will fight for their last vote in the key battleground states. Leave a comment down below about who you think is going to win the 2024 election. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, as it helps us provide you all with the best and most up-to-date content on the election. So please think about it, subscribing. Thank you guys so much again, and have a blessed and beautiful day.